I had Kevin Youkilis on yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah, and we talked a lot about just baseball, and for him now he's running a great craft brewery pub out in Los Gatos, California. So we were talking a lot about baseball and business and the lessons from baseball and how it carries over into business. And I think too a lot of people today in the business world, they're dealing with something that they haven't dealt with before, in that of the COVID, and they're trying to figure out what to do, how to not be in their head, but they're also trying to, for me, a talent evaluate. Who do I keep? Who are my most important players? Who are people that I like, but I have to let them go? So I think giving people insights as to how you really go about evaluating talent in the big leagues will have some amazing carryover to help people in business as well. So the question that I wanted to kick off with you is, when you are assessing and evaluating talent, like what is it that you're looking for right off the bat? Like what, Gene Watson, you've been scouting for so many years. What is it that's like when I see this, I know I'm going further on that kid?
Well, first of all, it's the absolute tools of the player, because we deal in so many situations when it comes to players from all levels, that the tools of the player have to be the first and foremost thing that you're trying to identify. And when you're talking about coming up with 25 of the best players in the world to win a world championship, I mean, you've really got a different lens on players than most. And what you try to do basically is just put them in their lane as to how impactful they can be, how they're going to be as an everyday guy, how they're going to be as a role player, how they're going to be as someone that's just going to be in your organization. From an off the field standpoint, when I'm talking about employees and things that you want to be a part of your organization, it's one word: it's passion.
Yeah.
And we feel like we've done a really good job in Kansas City of developing a culture where you've got passionate people that want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. It's not about them; it's about we, and just just waking up every day and doing the best you can to pull the rope for your organization. So separately, on the field, it's about the God-given tools and the physicality of the player and their ability to use the tools. And then off the field, when you're talking about employees, it's really about passion and wanting to be a part of something great.
Yeah. So when you're looking at a player and you say, okay, he has these tools, how do you go about projecting on what a player is going to be?
Well, you look at their size and their strength. You look at their durability. We basically evaluate the players on 5 tools: run, hit, hit for power, field, and throw. And then as you get into those 5 tools, now you're ranking them for each position. For instance, your first, third base, right field guys are going to be more about the bat, the power. You're up the middle of the diamond players are going to be more about the athleticism and the ability to run and throw and cover a lot of range. They're your top of the order, bottom of the order hitters. And so what you're really trying to do is profile the player, evaluating those tools. And then, when you're talking about dealing with high school and college players, you're really, envisioning the highest potential ceiling for that player. But you're thinking about what that player is going to be when he's a grown man, because you never want to go into it evaluating a player saying, well, we hope he gets to the big leagues. You've got to have a belief that not only is this player going to get to the big leagues, but that he's going to be successful, and he's going to be able to manage not just getting to the big leagues, but staying there and being a great teammate and being a good husband and being a good father and handling the distractions of whatever city that person could potentially be playing in. And so you're just throwing all of that into one big melting pot to come up and kind of look into this crystal ball of what you envision the player to be, 5-10 years down the road.
Yeah. And for you guys, are you paying that player based on who they are today or who you think that they're going to be and could be?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, out of the draft, you're obviously selecting the player for what you think he's going to be, 5-10 years down the road. And then, and I'll tell you a great story about one of our coaches with one of our players who was moving along pretty good, but there was still so much more ceiling to the player. And one day he brought the player over and he said, "Hey, I need to borrow $10 million. And he said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Hey, I need to borrow $10 million. You see that guy over there? He wants to start a business and he needs $10 million. And the player said to the coach, "Hey, who is this guy? What does he do? What's the business? Well, what's the return going to be? When will I get my money back? Well, he had 1,000 questions for the coach, and the coach said to the player, "Do you see all the questions you just asked me about him? That's everything that the front office is going to ask about you when they're talking about investing a 50, 75, $100 million player." And it really it hit the light switch for the player. And so it's a little bit of both, but ultimately you're dreaming on the high end of a player. And Dana, you've dealt with a lot of Hall of Famers, and there's just a different level to the player, their focus, their drive, their intensity, their leadership skills. And as you put players into particular lanes, those guys that you think are going to be those $100 million players they have to check all the boxes when it comes to dreaming and whether you think they're going to reach their ceiling as a player.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. In terms of the player's mindset though, cause that's a big thing as well. There's players out there and we've seen them, right? They have those 5 tools, but the question is their headspace. And we talk about that a lot. How much does that come into play for you in terms of making those financial decisions and commitments?
That's a big one. And especially in a market like Kansas City, where Kansas City is such a great city with great people, hardworking individuals. It's one of the smaller markets in baseball. They love their baseball. They love their players. And so we just can't bring just any player into Kansas City. They've got to be able to not only fit into what our structure is, our culture, what we believe in our organization, but they've got to be able, if you believe they're going to be good players, they got to be able to connect with the fan base. And that's one of the very special things that we had in 14 and 15, and why we continued to push in 16 and 17 with that group of players was the connection between the players and the fans. A very unique situation. And every market is kind of different. Of the 30, every market is kind of different in that. And so, but it's a huge part because it's a grind. And when you're talking about giving a player $1 million out of high school or college, and just that grind through the minor leagues and all the things that they're going to encounter, the different cultures, the travel, the failure, the injuries, you've got to have somebody that is so mentally tough and mentally strong that that as they begin to graduate to the big leagues and become successful, now all the bigger distractions that fall in line, they're going to be able to manage and handle them in their off the field life.
Yeah, I think something that I've heard over and over again from business leaders too is, hey, I have this guy on my team or this gal, and he or she is really talented at what they do, but there's always a problem, or they know how talented they are, and we sort of make money on their talent. So do we get rid of them, or do we keep them?
Well, I think there comes a point where the rubber meets the road, and you've got to do what's best for your organization, and that speaks to the lifespan of the employee. That speaks to the lifespan of the player. Hey, there's a lot of great players, a lot of very talented players right now that aren't with teams, and there's a reason why. Because when you're talking culture, is the kind of the voodoo word right now, and everybody wants to use the word culture, but culture is organic. I don't think you can manufacture culture. I think it's organic. I think that it's a group of players that want to win so bad and believe in what the organization believes, and it just kind of steamrolls into this great environment. And the thing that I say to players is, what's the end game? Okay, to an employee, okay, what's the end game? You've got all this talent, but at some point, all the things that pull you away from even being a better player or a better employee are going to cost you. And you may do really, really well on the front end, but what's the end game when everybody gets tired of all the things that you drag people down with, whether it's another player or another employee, that now you're sitting, it doesn't matter how talented you are, you're sitting on the sidelines watching because nobody wants you a part of their culture.
Yeah. Yeah. You see that, like I know in the NFL, you saw that with Antonio Brown, talented player, teams gave him a shot, and then they said, listen, we can't do it anymore with them just because of exactly that. So it sounds like, you're a big proponent of, it sounds like you draft culture, or you sign players that are going to be a good fit for Kansas City, for the Royals organization, for the players and the management that's already there. And as a result, great culture comes about.
Yeah, we love players. We love players, and we want players to be successful, but we need them to be successful within our framework and what we believe. And, you know, are they going to go to bed at night? Are they going to, you know, take care of their wife and their kids? Are they going to do the things that they need to do so that when they show up the next day, they can do their very best as a player, as an employee, whatever that may be?
Yeah. So, you know, again, like when we talk about Kansas City versus the Yankees, I mean, you have to do things very differently based on not just on based on finances, but also based on geography too. So, how you know, how do you find a player that could play in the Midwest? Like, I'm just trying to understand like the deeper thought process past the five tools. Like, how do you know a guy's going to be a fit in Kansas City? What sort of like background do you do? You know, background research on these players. Are you meeting with their families? Are you going?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We will dig, especially like in my position where I'm bringing players in from our organizations. We'll talk to the area scouts when they had them from 15, 16, 17-year-old, and you're really trying to connect the dots. What were they as an amateur, 15, 16, 17, into the draft? How did they manage success? How did they manage failure? What kind of lifestyle did they live? What kind of background are they from? And then they either sign out of high school or into college. You know, how did they manage? You know, what was their college career like? If we get them into pro ball, you know, what kind of you talk to coaches and managers that you just continually dig. And I tell young players all the time when I'm speaking, and I speak to a lot of young teams, that there's really nothing that we can't find out about you
Yeah.
within 48 to 72 hours. There's too many people that want to be a part of the process. There's too many people that want to impact players' lives in a positive fashion. And so you've just got to really, you know, beyond, and I break the player's career down into, you know, their family, their academics, their playing career, and their social aspects, the social media side of it. And so you want to keep those kind of priorities in order and do the very best that you can, knowing that you've been given a gift. You've been given something special. And there's a lot of people that don't want you to succeed. There's a lot of people that will tell you you're not going to succeed. And that's a kind of another entity, is looking for those players that you know, a lot of people have told them you're not going to be successful. And those guys that just keep grinding and pushing and say, you know what, regardless of what anybody says, I'm going to achieve my goal to be a great player.
Yeah. It's interesting when you say that, sort of what goes into sort of finding a player, learning more about them. When it's surprising that a lot more companies, when they're interviewing higher level talent, that they don't get to know the wife and the kids, and sort of, you know, it's always like, come in for an interview. But like, you have to interview the family and see the dynamics. Everything matters. It's a huge investment.
Well, and it really comes down to the priority of the leadership group and what the priorities are and what, again, kind of culture they want to create. You've got and everybody is kind of a byproduct of their upbringing and their beliefs and the things that they've been raised on and the things that they've had to do to ascend to these positions, you know, whether it's with a corporation or a small business or a team. You know, everybody's had a different journey. And so whatever those learning experiences are, I mean, Dane, I've been fired twice in this game. And every time I've been fired, I've learned so much from it that I look back on it now, 31 years later, and there's nothing I wouldn't change about any of it, because every time it happened, it made me better as an employee, a self-evaluator, the way I view things and the way I view other people when they're going through things. And so really it all comes down to leadership and what the focus of the leadership group is and what they hope to achieve as a leadership group.
Well, you know, again, you've been with a few different organizations. What attracts you to Kansas City so much? What do you love about it?
Well, I was with Dayton Moore in Atlanta. He was my boss in Atlanta. And then I left in 2002 and went to the Florida Marlins. And when Dayton got the job in June of 2006, I knew right away that I wanted to be a part of that experience. It was truly less than expansion at the time. There were 29 fringe players on the 40-man roster at the time. The ballpark was drawing 8,000 to 10,000 people a night. And I just felt like, what a special person, because Dayton Moore is one of the greatest leaders in our game and truly is bigger than baseball, in my opinion. And if you look at the statements and the things that we're doing with the Royals right now and the things that he's saying as our leader, it'll be a pretty good indicator of what makes it so attractive to work for the Kansas City Royals. But it was just taking on the challenge of really taking an organization that had not won in a very long time, and being with great people that are all like-minded and aligned. And it's a family, and just coming over and changing everything about the organization, and trying to be successful in winning, in the ultimate goal of winning a world championship. And fortunately, we were able to do that in 2015.
Okay. So you come over from Atlanta or the Marlins. Was it Atlanta or the Marlins? Okay. So you are there, Dayton's there, and you have this losing franchise that has a reputation of not winning in a long time. What is it like when you arrive there? Like, where do you start? Because I know that, like, again, there's a lot of CEOs that come over to businesses that have been losing for a long time. And there's coaches that go to organizations that have been losing for a long time. Where do you start? Because, I mean, you got a lot of, you got that championship trophy behind you that shows that you figured it out. But where the heck do you start?
It was truly one of the bigger lessons for me, Dana, because I had covered the Royals organization 9 years prior to the day that I went to work for them. And from the outside looking in, you think you know, you go to the minor leagues, you watch the coaches work, you sit with scouts, you meet front office people, you think you know, and then you get on the inside and you realize you don't know anything. And that's one real learning lesson for me in the transition, was getting inside the inner workings of the four walls, and then gaining some understanding as to why things were the way they were. And then, you've got that forming process where you've got the new employees coming in and the old employees that are there, and you've got the storming process where, everything you did was wrong and everything we do is right. And you're kind of battling back and forth. And then you norm, and everybody gets to know each other, and the trust level comes back up, and then you perform as a group. And I think if you look at what our baseball operations, our scouting, our player development, there's a lot of old from prior to when we got there, and there's a lot of new and even more new employees. And it's just all kind of come together and blended together into one vision, the vision of our general manager and our ownership group, and just executing that and getting everybody to pull the rope in one direction.
So Gino, kind of going back in time, when you got there and you were sort of, you thought you knew, but you didn't know, what would you say? What are some of the biggest things that you didn't know about the organization when you arrived?
Well, the financial structure for sure, and the spending, and then, just kind of the operation standpoints. There were a lot of great baseball people that were there that were simply not allowed to, execute or employ some of the things that they wanted to employ. And so you begin to, create the trust in those relationships, and have those relationships, and find out where each individual stands on things and their experiences and their viewpoints on the present state of the organization. And then you're kind of coming in with what your viewpoint is. I mean, we had won 14 straight years in Atlanta and worked for one of the greatest general managers of our time, and John Schuerholz. And in 2003, I go to Miami, and we win the World Series in 2003. 97 and 98, 99, when I was in San Diego, we went from worse to the World Series, where we were swept by the Yankees, back to worse in 99. So you're kind of taking all of your personal experiences and the experiences of the group, the successes and the failures, trying to blend them into where you are presently, and just come up with a plan. And this is the things that we've got to do. These are the paramounts right now. And that takes time. When you're coming in and you're making a lot of changes, and you're dealing with really an organization that was truly as much as an expansion organization as you could have, now it's just one day at a time, getting the people to buy into your belief system, getting people to buy into the culture you want to build. First and foremost, getting good players and helping them develop into great leaders. And in 2010, when we won the Texas League, that team was the team that eventually went to the World Series in 14 and 15. And those guys grew up together, were drafted together, played all the way up together. And it just created such a culture that they held each other accountable. Yeah. They held each other accountable to be great. And that's what made it so unique.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think a lot of people forget, they get so caught up in the entertainment value of sport that many people forget that there is a whole business element and engine behind it, that goes way beyond just the salaries in which we pay players. And it's cool to hear, your talk about culture, about people working together, about the importance of finding like-minded people, so they can create sort of that winning energy. I know in New York, for us, the mission statement, you go to some companies today, they have like mission statements posted everywhere. For us, it was win the World Series. That's it. And that's what I always found to be pretty cool about sport. It's so, it is pretty clear as to why we're all here.
And it's proof to me, like, and this is easy to say now, but we went from 2006 to really just a total rebuild, really a build. To me, a rebuild is when you've won a world championship and you're starting over. If you've never won, to me, it's still a build. And we go from 06 to getting to the World Series in 14 and falling short, and then winning it in 15. And when you're talking about a market size of 2 million people and the things that everything that has to go right along the way, when you trade a Zach Greinke for Lorenzo Cain and Alcides Escobar and Jake Odorizzi, and you can take Jake Odorizzi and you trade one of your top prospects in Jake Odorizzi to the Tampa Bay Rays for James Shields and Wade Davis. You trade for Johnny Cueto, you trade for Ben Zobrist. All of like every move when you're a small market has to go right, because you get one move to a lot of large market, 4 or 5 moves. And so it just speaks to the rhythm and the timing of knowing when it's time to push the gas, knowing that it may not work out. We were a ground ball away in Houston from being eliminated in 15, and we ended up winning the World Series. So you've got to have that day-to-day drive of believing, and as we do right now, that we will win another world championship in Kansas City. That drive of believing it, having the people that want to pull the rope in that direction, and then just the day-to-day decisions that you make one brick at a time in trying to build the skill set of a roster, talented players that believe in each other and want to win together.
Yeah, and alongside that, I think it's cool. So you said you guys started the rebuild process or the build process in 06 and won in 14, did you say?
14 and 15.
So it took 8 years to get that thing right, which is I think is pretty amazing, because you had to stay focused for 8 years. And I'm sure those first 2 years, you didn't see a whole lot of change, but not a lot.
The first couple of years, you're just trying to evaluate what you have.
Yeah.
You're trying to evaluate employees, evaluate coaches, evaluate managers, because we love players and you want to be fair to players. You want to give them a fair opportunity to show them, well, you just can't come in with an assumption of what you think, on top of there's got to be other players that you can go out and get. So it was really through the draft and international signings like Salvador Perez and Kelvin Herrera, and through the draft with Eric Hosmer and Mike Moustakas, that you begin to get those foundation, those building blocks to create that winning culture.
Yeah. Now, in baseball, to create sort of that winning culture and get yourself rolling again, how important would you say is scouting? Based on what you're saying, I'm sitting here saying, I think the scouts sort of drive the whole thing. The GM and the scouts are like, you're getting the talent.
No question. And you have to know the players. When you're sitting in the living room with Eric Hosmer and his family, and Mike Moustakas and his family, and JJ Piccolo and Lonnie Goldberg did such a tremendous job of that. And when Rene Francisco's staff is sitting in the home of Salvador Perez in Venezuela and Kelvin Herrera, and even when we're making these deals, when we traded away Zach Greinke for Alcides Escobar and Cain, and we traded for Shields and Davis, you got to know the players, and you got to know, okay, this is what we have in Kansas City. And when we bring these guys in, what is it going to do to what we already have? Is it going to be a positive? Is it going to be a negative? When you go get a Ben Zobrist and you've got to trade away, one of your top pitching prospects, okay, what's that going to do as an injection to the roster? And really, during the 14 years, one of the biggest things we ever did was acquire Raul Ibanez, one of the great leaders in our time. And he was kind of on the downhill slide of his career, towards the back end of his career, but he came in and impacted that team and beyond 2014 more than any one player potentially could have on the field. And so it's just knowing that the players you're bringing in have a winning attitude. They care about their teammates. They want to be great teammates. and just trying to put all that into a clubhouse and going out and playing the best baseball that you possibly can. And hopefully you have a little luck on the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How did you get into scouting? How did you sort of fall in love with that aspect of the game?
You know what? I was a role player at the University of Texas at Arlington, and in 1990 we made the Central Regional in Austin, and um, the Southwest Conference tournament was taking place in Austin, and I was going home in between the regional and so I'm on my way home, and the coaches pull me in, and they said, "Hey, we want you to go to the Southwest Conference tournament and watch the games." And
Huh.
I'm like, "You're kidding me?" And I'm like, "No." They were like, "No, we want you to go watch the games." And so I'm literally sitting behind home plate watching the Southwest Conference tournament and writing down I don't know what I'm doing. I'm writing down, he's a pull hitter. He uses the whole field. He chases down. Just writing notes, as many notes as I can. This is his out pitch with runners in scoring position. And I send this report in, and that's when I knew I was hooked. And
Okay.
I went to work for the Rangers for 3.5 years in the home clubhouse. And when I moved home, I started a youth baseball team kind of before select baseball really took off, and 4 or 5 of my players were draftable players. And
Hmm.
Ralph Bratton with the Houston Astros called and asked me to be an associate, and everything kind of took off from there.
That's cool, man. It's fun. I think it's so cool what you get to do because I mean, you're looking at the player at such levels of depth, and you're breaking down every piece of their game and you're tracking players. You're watching how they're progressing. I mean, I've always said baseball has such an amazing system, and the guys that make it all go are those guys that are grinding it out on the road in small cities that you don't even know who they are, but they're so responsible for putting that talent out on that field.
Well, and when you've failed as a player and you have such a love for the game, and you have so much respect and admiration for players and their accomplishments, and 2% of high school players go on to play Division I baseball, and 2% of them go on to play pro ball. And I mean, the odds of getting to the major leagues, it's a miracle to play in the big leagues. So many things have to go right. You've got to be healthy. You've got to have opportunity. You've got to have luck along the way. You've
Hmm.
got to have so many things go right. But there's nothing greater in the world than watching a young player have a dream and do everything they can. And 99% of them fall short of it, but they come away with so much in their lives that are going to carry them through the rest of their lives to be great employees and husbands and fathers. And I've always said that minor league players are the most employable people in the world. They've got to be on time every day.
Yeah.
They've got to get along with all cultures, all kinds of teammates. They've got to deal with adversity. They've got to deal with the grind of 12, 14-hour bus rides. And to me, there's nothing more employable than that. And so just to see kids that have a dream achieve those dreams, whether it's playing in college, playing pro ball, or reaching the big leagues, it's an amazing thing to watch if you truly love the game and you love players.
Yeah. Is there a particular player that you were involved with or a signing that you were involved with that, let's say, the majority didn't see what you saw and you were able to push and advocate for that player to get him through? Anybody on top of your mind?
Well, there's one that I didn't get, and I
Okay.
tell this story all the time, and this was like the first one where, hey, you know what, you can do this. I know the player well now. We talk about it last year together, but I was with the Atlanta Braves, and there was a pitcher out of Waco Midway High School named Zach Duke,
Okay.
who was in big league camp. He's probably got 14, 15 years in the big leagues, and the word on the streets was he was going to college, he was going to school, he was going to school, going to school. Well, his English teacher, her kids played for me, and she's
Okay.
like, "Gee, this kid's Simon." And we didn't get him, but I fought extremely hard for him in the room and with the group. And Roy Clark, who was the scouting director at the time, still today brings it up because he ended up having a very long career. And that was kind of the first line of conviction for me of, hey, stick to what you believe in, right or wrong. And Dana, truly, you're going to fail a lot at this. You're going to make a lot of mistakes when you're evaluating players, and it's just keep going, learn from your mistakes. And it's truly all the failures on evaluations that kind of whittle you down to having all the beliefs that you have when you evaluate. And 31 years in, you have a completely different perspective of the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years you're in it.
And do this is something too, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, do you approach every player from like almost like a clean slate? Because I think it's, there is a lot of similarities between players that it's easy to say, he looks like so-and-so. And well, I know how so-and-so's career went. He shot up like a rocket, became a problem, and we had to dump him. Like, because I could imagine that being hard, bringing some of yesterday's thought process and baggage into today, making a decision on a player.
Well, you certainly have your player Rolodex. And like if I go to a college game now, the first thing I'll try to do is profile the player. Okay, who does he remind me of? And what were the things that player did well? What did he do poorly? How did he adjust? How does this kid's makeup compare to that? But really, it's just dreaming big on the player and believing in the player and knowing that, hey, I'd rather this player with his skill set succeed with us or fail with us than succeed with somebody else, because there's going to be a lot of that. And it's just kind of creating some instincts. And, you're sitting at a ballpark and you're watching this guy, and it may be a high profile guy that everybody likes. And you're watching him and you're going, man, there's something about this guy that I don't like, and vice versa. And so it's just creating, first of all, identifying, every day, the things that I use on players are tools, statistics, role, makeup, and risk. What are the tools? What are his statistics? What's his high ceiling role? What's his makeup? And what's the risk in the acquire? Is it a waiver claim? Is it $12 million a year in a free agent deal? So so those are the things that you have to factor in every day when you're evaluating each player, but just using your instincts and trying to move forward with them.
Yeah, I love that. There's a word that you use that I don't find is used often enough outside of the game of baseball, and it's the word makeup. Those of us that have been in the game, I mean, that's just a very common word, so can you describe makeup? Because some people think makeup, people outside of baseball, they don't know what makeup is. How do you see makeup?
Well, I think there's off-field and there's on-field. And again, there's a lot of players whose off-field makeup and their personal habits are not good, but God gifted them. They're so skilled as players that the opportunities are going to be there for them. Now, again, back to the bad player, the bad employee, how long is the league or the team's going to tolerate that versus what they're bringing to your culture and the ability to win in between the white lines. On-field makeup is just a enduring desire to win. It's an enduring desire to overcome adversity. It's an enduring desire to look 24 guys in the face when you're down 4 runs in the 8th inning and go into the dugout and tell them, we are not losing this game. Mike Moustakas. I mean, to me, there's a difference. On the field makeup is the guy that endures injuries and keeps coming back. You're not going to tell the kid he's not going to make it. It's the things that just make a champion, and you talk about it all the time. And there's so many things that these players go through as major league players, as minor league players, as college players, that when they get into the workforce, they've experienced so much in between the white lines in their personal lives that all these other things, all these adversities in everyday life almost seem second nature to them because they've been dealing with it for so long, because baseball is such a game of failure.
Yeah. Okay, so I have this situation for you, right? You got a player that has tremendous makeup and talent that's good, not great. And then you got a player that's got great talent and moderate, leaning low on makeup. What do you do? What's the decision? Grab them both if you can, or what?
The context of the acquire, Dana. I mean, is it a trade? Are they both with one organization and it's a trade? Is it a waiver?
Let's say 2 free agents.
We're going to go with the talent and knowing that our coaching staff can manage everything else. We're actually going to believe as an organization that we're going to make that talented player understand what's on the line for him moving forward and what the end game is for that player. But you can have 25 great guys in the world with average ability, and you're never going to win a world championship. So there has to be that give and take when you're talking about impact players and them having a chance to impact your team for 162 games. There's a little give and take in that. And with every player that comes across our desk in a given day, it's, okay, here's the skill set, here's the makeup, And then we communicate with our coaches. This is what we need to do to make him better.
Yeah.
And you've got to believe in your coaches to make players better every day.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I actually thought you were going to lean the other way and say, hey, I know this guy's got great talent, but man, he's like taming a lion, where this other guy, I think we could actually up his talent set just enough to where his makeup will sort of make up the difference. But you're saying, and I also agree with this fundamentally too, is that you talent is just an amazing gift. And when you see
it's ceiling versus safe.
Yeah.
It's ceiling versus safe. And when you're talking about, especially a small market team going up against the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox or the Los Angeles Dodgers or the Chicago Cubs, you better have some talent on the field.
Yeah.
But it really comes down to who you have leading that talent and the character of those men and how they're going to hold players accountable. And you believe in that, and you believe that they're going to make the player better and hold them accountable and help them reach their ceiling for your window as long as you have the player.
Got it. Now, is there ever an instance where you would take less talent in exchange for better makeup? And the answer, again, could still be no. It's just, I don't know. I'm asking sort of an open question.
The context of the acquire, absolutely. Okay. The context of the acquire. And, when we first got to Kansas City, we had situations where, there were some very talented players that we considered, taking some risk on. And in one situation, we eventually did, and I won't name the player, but we had a player that had some off the field issues, and I pushed for the player. The acquisition cost was low. And at the time, again, you're just trying to build up brick by brick, just one brick at a time. Get your 4s to be 5s. Then hopefully your 5s turns into 6s. And I'm talking about a scouting grade on a 2 to 8. 8's Mike Trout's, 2 is me. Okay. Yeah. So you're just talking to get better by each position. And so we took this kid on, and he had some issues. And when we got him, the fan base was not exactly excited about it. And, the question was asked of me, what are we going to do about this? And I'm like, first time he gets 5 hits in a game, everybody's going to forget. And that's exactly what happened.
That's
because
true.
we told him, when you come here, this is what's going to be expected of you. If it doesn't work out, you're going to be out the door. Now what? Do you want to keep playing, or do you want your career to be over? Because now it's strike 2. And you're not that great of a player that you can – he was better than what we had, but you're not that great of a player that you can get away with keep doing these things. So if we get rid of you, the whole, everybody in the world knows that something's wrong. And he came in and did a tremendous job and did everything that we needed him to do. And that's really what it came down to in that decision.
Yeah, I guess too, with what you're saying, it sounds like by knowing your players and knowing the talent in which you're bringing in, there's always going to be some talent that's a little bit more management intensive. And if you know that, you put the plan in place to sort of monitor and manage that.
Yeah, and you just present it. I'll present it to my boss, Dayton Moore. Hey, here's the risk, here's the return. And then you go to your coaches and your managers, and they either say, I don't want that guy, or, you know what, we can manage this guy.
Yeah.
It could be the 25th piece of trying to win a world championship, and it's 81 games in the playoffs for half a season, and the coaching staff's going, hey, we can manage that guy. We got it. You go to your leadership, your leaders of your team, your players, and you say, hey, we're talking about this guy. You get their input. So it's not just one person making the decision. It's a collective decision in trying to manage that player. And do you think he's going to come in and toe the line, or do you think that he's going to continue to do the things that he's done in his past?
Yeah, it's funny. As you're saying this, I'm thinking of one player in particular that we pulled in, a little bit later in his career, in that Sidney Ponson. And, Sid had definitely a rep, coming in, but I've quickly realized that, number one, he was a great teammate. The guys loved him. He can get a little bit wild, but you have to just show him some love. And when you show him the love, he shows it back. So there's
leadership. And it's the power of the pinstripes in New York. So
that's true too.
Again, that comes down to who's going to say the things to that player that need to be said that nobody will. And if you watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, and everybody talks about, him being a tyrant and all those things, what he said was true. I never did anything that I didn't expect. I didn't ask my teammates to do anything that I didn't do. And did I push them when they didn't want to be pushed? Absolutely. And That's leadership. That's great leadership.
Yeah, that's the thing too. You know, a lot of companies today, they sort of shy away from that. It's easy, you know, sometimes going easy on players and people is not the best idea. Challenging them, sometimes causing a little bit of internal friction to get the most out of a player can be a good thing.
Well, what I think is unfortunate with some corporations, and I've worked in the corporate world and been a part of big corporations early in my life, and the thing that you have to get is you can't just treat your employees like a number.
Yeah.
Whether it's people you're supervising or whether people they're supervising, somebody at some level has got to know the employee and know what makes them tick. Some people are going to wake up in the morning, they're going to walk through the door, and they're going to work their rear off for 8 hours, guns a-blazing. And some people are going to handle things in their personal life a little differently, and they're going to need, some lifting up. You've got to know your people. You've got to know what each individual person is going through, because if you just treat them like a number and you treat them all the same and you don't know what that particular person is going through, you'll have no culture. You're just going to have a number-based system that maybe it produces, maybe it doesn't. But if you want to be successful over the long term, you've got to get in and know your people and know who it is you don't have to motivate, who it is you do have to motivate.
Yeah.
A lot of people are dealing with a lot of things, especially right now. And it helps when you know in the decisions that employee made for that day, their production, their non-production, what they could be going through in their lives. And when you get into that and you show people that you care, that you truly care about them, now you're going to get somebody that wants to charge the hill for you and wants to be the best employee they can be for you because you believe in them.
Yeah. No, it's a great lesson. How would you say the game have you seen it change through the years in terms of the players? Just in terms of attitudes of players, social media has probably created just a little bit of a different dynamic, but have you seen a change in player mentality?
Well, they're
Through the years?
incredibly smart. The players today are incredibly intelligent. They're very in tune with technology. Obviously, when you're talking about all the technology that is entering the game, what I don't like to see with that is the naturalness of the player taking away. And it's something that we try to identify when we're talking about players. So you've got a player that basically starts playing 6, 7 years old, and it's all about being a great teammate and getting along with your teammates and naturalness for the game. And what's the snack after the game? Where are we going? We're going to Whataburger, we're going to Dairy Queen. And then they kind of gravitate into the 12 to 14-year-old age group where the field gets bigger, the bases get longer, the mound's further away. I'm not hitting third. I'm not playing shortstop. Dad's not coaching. And that's the first wave of adversity for players. And that's where most of the dropout is. 80% of the dropout is there. And I tell families all the time, and you get it in airports and hotels. I've got a 12-year-old. He's the best player in the world. And I tell him, hey, until he's got the distraction of a car in the parking lot and a girlfriend in the stands, I don't want to hear about how the player is. Because they got to manage the success and the failure now and work through that. But beyond that now is there's so much technology with the Rapsodo and the TrackMan and the Blast motion sensors that these kids are very, very smart, and they understand their bodies better. They understand their deliveries better. They understand their swings better, which is a wonderful thing. What you don't want them to do is be driven by that. You don't want them to lose that 12 to 14-year-old player where they would be turned into good players. And now here comes all the information and you lose that as a player. No, we want you to have this information and apply it, but go do what you do. Keep it simple. Don't ever forget that it's still about you versus him and competition and competing and being a great teammate. And when things go south, it's not always because the data said this.
Yeah.
You still want to keep that naturalness for the player, the leadership of the player, and just being able to go out and compete more than anything.
Yeah, I love that. I like the word you just used, compete, because I could see guys maybe even getting comfortable competing against the technology and forgetting hey, there's a whole game out there that's where you need to be competing.
No question about it. You cannot lose that naturalness as a player and just believe in it. And we've acquired players in the last 3 years that, we were given information that their naturalness was just being taken away from them. They were being asked to do things. And so we look at it like, hey, we're going to bring them in and we're going to take all that stuff away from them and let them get back to being, what the report said all the way up until
Yeah.
they hit that wall of failure, and see if we can get them back. And we've had a little bit of success with that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask you that. Does that make potentially an organization more or less attractive by having more technology or less, or being more reliant on it or less? I could see like a player that appreciates more of the naturalness looks at that as an advantage. Hey, I'm not going to go to Kansas City and these guys are going to be shoving this down my throat when it affects my performance negatively.
I think you could see some of that with 5 rounds in the draft this year, and then you've got all the free agent signings afterward. I think it kind of turns into a recruiting.
Okay.
And what's my opportunity going to be? Where are the minor league cities? What's going to be asked of me technologically? But I also think teams, for the most part, do a great job of recognizing some guys you give it to and some guys you don't. Some guys, they can roll out of bed, they're going to hit. They can roll out of bed, they're going to play an above average shortstop, above average center fielder. You don't have to get too deep in it. And there's some of them that maybe are 50 type players that, hey, if we can do these things to make you better, maybe you're an all-star. And so I think there's positives and negatives to both sides of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's cool too, as we're again circling and sort of wrapping up, is how you're able to know or have an idea as to, hey, this player would do really well here and this player won't. I always thought that's really cool, because I think too many people, they just look at talent as talent. And there are those sort of nuances to talent where very talented, but not going to do great in a big city. Very talented will do amazing in a small market. And I just think that's some great intel that could really help any organization excel with their people.
No doubt. And you have to know who you are as an organization. You have to know who's going to fit your coaching staff. There's not one player that I'm evaluating that I don't say, okay, what's Mike Matheny going to think of this guy? What's Cal Eldred going to think of this guy? What's Rusty Kuntz, Pedro Gafal? What are these guys? When it's August 5th and this kid's on the mound, it's 110. What's Salvador Perez going to think? So you've really, when you have kind of that extra lens, you can really kind of narrow it down, and the questions answer themselves pretty easily when it comes to that. And again, Kansas City is such a special place. Our ballpark is such a unique ballpark to play in that it's not for everybody, and our organization is not for everybody. But the things that we've tried to always embody is a baseball organization that just believes in players, loves players, wants to create a great culture for players, and watch each and every one of them, whether they get out of A-ball or play 10 years in the big leagues, watch them all, achieve their goals as baseball players.
Yeah. You know what I always found cool, Gino, about going to Kansas City is that it almost felt like, in a positive way, just a big minor league park where the fans, like, you felt connected with the fans. You felt like they were supporting you and they weren't against you. And in other stadiums and other cities, they can turn on you, but that Midwestern sort of warmth and spirit is definitely alive and well. And I think those fountains out there also keep things nice and calm and cool too.
Well, I'll tell you this quick story, and this is the absolute God honest truth. And I was in Kansas City in late May in 06. Actually Dayton had the job about a week, and I was in covering the team, and it's a Wednesday night. They're playing the Indians. It's, there's 8,000 people at the game, and I mean it's a bad scene. And there's a family of 4 up behind me about 10 rows, and I've told this story 1,000 times in Kansas City, and they're down like 13-2. I mean, they're going to get trounced again, and this family is at the top of their lungs yelling, "Let's go Royals," and they won't stop. And I'm looking at the scoreboard, I'm looking at the Royals logo, and I'm looking at the scoreboard, and I'm listening to this family, and I was really struggling with leaving the Marlins because Dan Jennings is an incredible leader, an incredible man, and he was my boss. And I said to myself, it's time to come over here and help fill this place up and see these fans celebrate. And to think about that night and then the parade, cool. It's just an incredible journey and something I'll never forget. It's a really personal thing to me.
It's cool because a lot happens between those two events, but there's a reason, you connected it, which is cool. Gino, my last question for you that I always ask on the show, I call it the Becoming a Champion show. I always feel like we're all striving to become champions, but I always like to get the thoughts and opinions of those I bring on. what does the word champion mean to you?
Well, first of all, it means just waking up and surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded, people that want the best for you, people that are going to help you achieve your goals and lead you even when you don't want to be led. And you have been one of those people for me in my life, Dana. And
Thank you.
so it's surrounding yourself with people that are going to make you better. They're going to hold you accountable even when you don't want to be held accountable. It's striving to improve yourself every day, staying open-minded with things. Don't ever think that the way you think something should be done is the only way it's going to be done. Listen, be a great listener, learn from different things, pick from other great leaders, and just being selfless and wanting to be a part of something bigger than you, and waking up each day and trying to impact as many lives as you can, and just do the very best you can. Because, again, I say it all the time, we're all borrowing this game for a very short time. We're all going to be on this earth for a very short time, and it's the people that you can impact in their lives, and honor the ones that have impacted you, that are going to make you be the very best you can be.
Awesome. No, I love that, man. Well, you've impacted me too through the years in many different ways, even your karaoke skills, which we'll have to talk about another time, but they're second to none, folks. All right, brother. Have a great day, and I appreciate you coming on.
All right, Dan. Love you, man. Thanks so
All
much.
right. Love you too, Gino. I'll see you later.